Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Good Marketing with Stephanie, where we talk about the macro and micro challenges facing marketers at all levels today. Today, we have a very special guest joining us for a conversation about how and why marketers need to get back to strong classic creative work as the foundation of brand building. We're not talking about gimmicks or one-offs that have an incredibly short shelf life. Instead, we're talking about creative rooted in classic tenets of advertising. Our guest says that marketers need to trust the process and we need to rebalance the creative and performance marketing fulcrum. Ellis Verdi is the president and founder of DeVito Verdi, a full-service award-winning advertising agency based in New York, New York. You might be familiar with some of Ellis's work. As a former board member of the National Retail Federation and a current board member of the Partnership for New York City, Ellis has worked on clients ranging from Macy's, Kohl's, and Legal Seafoods to Mount Sinai Hospital, BMW, the ACLU, and several New York senatorial, mayoral, and gubernatorial races. After spending the first half of his advertising career split between the client side with Pepsi, American Home Products, etc., and the agency side with Gray Advertising, Ellis made a big decision. He was going to do the type of advertising that was so desperately lacking in the industry. Strong strategic thinking buffeted by even stronger and often controversial creative work. The one-man Ellis Verdi and Partners agency that took flight in 1989 began to soar a few years later when Ellis partnered with longtime creative director Sal DeVito to create what would become DeVito Verdi. Since then, it has become one of the most acclaimed and influential advertising agencies in the industry. Named the best agency in the US 6 times by the American Association of Advertising Agencies, DeVito Verdi has garnered thousands of creative awards, created some of the most memorable ads over the past few decades, and you can see why we're excited to have him on the show. Welcome, Ellis.
Oh boy, that was some intro. Thank you, Stephanie. Just terrific. I appreciate all of it.
Of course, and we appreciate you being here. So, Ellis, we really like to start by giving our listeners a little bit more background. And obviously, I just talked about, a bit of your career journey there leading up to current day. But could you tell us a little bit more about what you do at DeVito Verdi? Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and what your journey has been like getting to this point?
Great. I will definitely. And it's quite an unusual journey, but I'm not. It's the only one out there that started the way we did, or the way. And the starting point is really I had no idea what I wanted to do for a living, and that was probably a number of people, as I remember, not knowing what they're doing, but they sort of bumped into advertising. And I had about 7 jobs at getting out of college. I didn't like the law firm because I just didn't like the environment. It was really not for me. And so I ended up in starting an ad agency just because that's what I felt I wanted to do. But before that, I took some other jobs along the way, as you mentioned, Gray Advertising, client side, and so on. But the start of the agency was primarily pretty dramatic. And I have to say it's a representation of where I grew up, which is New York. And how I grew up, which is kind of part of New York. For example, New York is known for straight talk. Our ads are really straight talk. New York is, New Yorkers don't mind saying something and being a little controversial. Well, guess what? That's sort of our MO at DeVito Verdi as well. So we talk straight. We tell people how we feel about things. We don't shy away from taking risks. We're pretty much taken many risks over the course of our career, and they're qualified and they've done very well to benefit us and our clients that we take the risk with. One of the original risks we took was we did an ad, and this is a quick story. We did an ad with a straitjacket in it. We said if you're paying over $100 for a dress shirt, maybe we suggest a jacket to go with it. It was for Daffy's. The minute that went out, we had demonstrations on the street of New York. They had the placards with our faces on it, with crosses on them, and they all went to one of the biggest award shows at the time. And all of a sudden, all these agencies descended on this big show, and our placards and the demonstrations. And who was this agency that people are all upset about? Well, it was that's how we kind of made our intro. So there it is. And then there was a series of other chances and risks we took over the course of. And by the way, it's not, you wouldn't know. It wasn't a risk that we predetermined. We did great ads based on our philosophy, and it ended up being that some of them, because we talk straight, we tell people like it is. We believe in revealing truth as part of what we do. And sometimes when you do that, it touches people in ways that they react. So that's sort of how we started the agency. And we have so many other stories, of course, after that. We did an ad for a New York magazine. It was taken down by Rudy Giuliani, and it became the biggest First Amendment case in advertising history at that point. How dare he take an ad down just because he's mayor of New York? He does the buses are public, and we won that case against him. He, invited the biggest law firm, and we had whatever we could, and we won in court. So it is really a history of just saying things the way they should be said, being truthful, expressing the truth behind the product or the service, and that could happen to rub people sometimes the wrong way, and that's been our history.
So I absolutely love the philosophy that you have, and I love that you talk about taking risks and how it is important to do that, right? If you want to have a brand that stands out, if you want to have a brand that has lasting impact and lasting power, right? And I think something that we've seen a lot in the marketing field and the advertising field and generally, in this space over the last few years is that a lot of brands seem afraid to take risks. They don't really want to try anything outside of what they 100% can track and know will bring them new, leads or new sales or whatever that might be, right? They're not really thinking about the longer term view, but about, in the immediate short term, what is going to bring me the most, revenue, essentially, which it makes sense, right? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. But we've seen this sort of deviation away from a willingness to take risks and stand out. So how would you respond to that? What's your observation? And what would you recommend that brands do? Maybe they're not ready to take that risk where they could have Rudy Giuliani taking their ad down, right? But maybe they do want to grow a little bit and try some new things. What would you recommend for those brands?
So that's a great question. The idea of taking risks, I have to unpack a few things because you brought up a few kind of good points and thoughts, and we'll just a couple things. First of all, I don't believe necessarily that risk is something to seek. What is something to seek out is revealing truths about what you're doing, what your product or service is. Now, when you reveal truth, if you really reveal truth, and we have so many examples of this, you are somewhat, when people look at that ad and say, wait a second, you can't say that, or would you say that, and would somebody react to that? And certainly you have to be conscious of all of that. And we know about this stuff that happens, Sweeney, Outdoor Boy. We know about all these people that are always doing something to express themselves and some truth about their product, and end up in some controversy. The other point is, so it's a point about not necessarily going after risk, but going after developing some way of expressing the truth about your product or service. The other point that you make is a good one. The ability to look at advertising in a way that's not related to did I just make a sale yesterday or not? And I say that the world kind of went to a place that I'm going to say was imbalanced. Everybody was extremely excited about performance marketing when it first came out. For years, look at Mad Men. We were promised, that, those agency guys, they're me sales and they're promising me that. Wait a second, I can really show it. Well, in fact, a lot of what was said in those Mad Men years were kind of truthful and really represented something that was what I call brand saliency. It was like the importance of a long-term view of your brand. And we know in the past 3 to 4 years, when performance marketing kind of took over all of the budgets, we have lost brand saliency. That has been proven now. We are not in a place where that's questionable. We are in a place now where people know that this activity called performance marketing actually doesn't help the long-term perspective and can decrease. Nike pull away from it. We've seen other businesses pull away from it. I just business that was impacted by it very significantly, and they basically have to turn back to going to a broader sense of who they are from a branding perspective. It is, but I also want to say the third point I want to unpack is really it's a balance, right? So I don't want to ever say that one thing is better than the other full time, and that goes for, because there are aspects of performance marketing that actually make sense. And if you're doing a product that has, and if that product has some real reason to make a sale, and you want to go on TikTok and you have an influencer that tells you, by the way, demonstrate on TikTok, when you demonstrate a product, I mean, for history has shown it's one of the best formats in advertising, right? It works. It definitely works. So if look at my left cheek is all clear of acne, and my right cheek has all the acne on it, and I use this cream, and the influencer tells me, well, that will perform, and you may not. It performs so well that you may not even want the cream, but because it does so well, it's there. It is. It's in your closet, or in your cabinet, because it did so well in selling you. And then the other thing that we were just talking about is these, what I call gimmicks or short-term impact kind of activity. We always looked at an ongoing branding effort as being great, not only because it has an ongoing viewpoint, but now and then we prop up the sales with things that help it during the year, during certain new product intros, during whatever it is, we prop it up. Or if there's a PR thing that's going on that we want to take advantage of, there is no reason not to do those things, but there is reason not to depend on them. And the problem with a lot of people today is depending on what I call these gimmicks instead of sometimes the long-term view. Now, one other point about that is very often these gimmicks are clever and not creative. They tend to have a term shelf life. They tend to be, oh, that's clever. And you can almost ask yourself, if you're saying, oh, that's clever, and you're not saying that's creative, when someone says that's creative, bigger thought. Clever is almost like a subset, just like it is a subset in the branding scheme of things. Clever is, kind of cool, nifty. It's kind of a hack maybe or something like that, but it's definitely not at as high a level as strong creative essence and the revealing truths, as I spoke about. That's a higher order of branding in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love for you to explain a little bit as well the relationship between the creative aspect and the brand saliency. How do those two things connect, and how would you, and I'm sure you have many examples as well from your work, but how would you define that relationship between being truly creative and establishing brand saliency?
Okay, that's a very good question, and there's different ways to answer. The important way to look at that is there are a lot of people out. There's a bunch of people you call your target that might be ongoing purchasers. Maybe depending on what the product is or the service, they might use you fairly frequently. But really, conquest is the real mission, I think, of most marketers, to grow business share and not necessarily just mine loyalty. Mining loyalty is important, but really on the bigger picture, conquest becomes pretty important. I believe that in that regard, people don't necessarily know what they want at the moment that you advertise. They don't, because a lot of the new thought processes get them when they need it, when they, at the time they want it, exactly what they need, and find the right target. I mean, that is activity that you don't want to disregard. I get it. But what about all of those people out there that, you know, don't know that they need right now. Maybe they want to buy a coffee machine. We're just talking about coffee. Let's say they want to buy a coffee machine. They don't know top of mind where they're going to go for the coffee machine, but I want it to be there. I want them to know, Nespresso is a cool brand, and I would like to get one of those when it comes to my mind. I need mental availability. I need them to have, I need to get a piece of their mind that I hold on to, because I'm advertising, because I don't know what they're going to want when they're going to want it. The other point about it is to get mental availability, and this is important. I talk about revealing truth. What revealing truth is, if you go to a comedy show and somebody on the stage says something funny, you go, oh, that's exactly it. That's really, oh, did you hear that? That's really funny. That's what I was thinking. And what they're doing is they're taking something from the back of your mind and moving it to the front, and you go, aha. Well, that's what the best advertising brands do. What they do is they get the mental availability. They get a piece of your thought process, your top of mind awareness or predisposition. They get a piece of it, because what they've done is they've given you a little bit of a surprise that goes from the back of your mind to the front of your mind, and then they hold on to it. Super Bowl has tried to do that in almost every commercial for years and years. The business has tried to do that for years and years. It is the essence of what we do for a living, and to disregard that essence is a mistake, because many, and maybe even most people, don't know what they want at the moment that you're telling them to get something.
That is such an excellent point. And yet so much ad creative that's out there falls flat, right? I think there's a stat, something like 85% of ads, like video ads anyway, fail to reach the 2.5 second mark that's needed for lasting brand impact. So, you know, why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that so many advertisers and marketers these days are missing the mark? And I know pre-show we talked a bit about the anti-creative part. So like, why do you think that part is missing? Like, what happened?
I think it's a little bit sad in some ways. 4 or 5 years ago, and if you read things like Google Think, I mean, a lot of the platforms did this work, right? So a lot of the new platforms, Facebook, and they were promoting direct clients and agencies that you don't need to be creative, because we will tell you what's creative based on A/B testing and various other performance measures. Well, we talked about the fact that decreased brand saliency, but what it also did is it kind of put in the ethosphere that creative was not that important, and that impacted the industry in many ways. And many ways aren't positive. For example, the performance marketing folks and all of the folks that were saying it was not relevant were almost all working for the platforms. I mean, a lot of the creators today still, what they do when they open up their shop, they do a social post. I'm just exaggerating a little bit here. They might do a social post, they get a lot of attention, and oh my God, I could open up an ad agency. Probably not, because they're not using the tenets, which we can talk about. But what they are doing is they're in a position to service clients by saying, oh, you want to get onto Facebook? Let us help you do that. You want to do a search camp? Let us help you do that. So they're helping clients get closer to being able to go into the new media realm comfortably. But really, when you look at advertising historically, they were far more important leadership roles taken by the advertising agency. They would be far more leaders. They would say, you know what, don't do that. Do a big outdoor board. Don't do that. Think differently about your brand. Don't just go where the platform's taking you. Find a way. Now, I understand a lot of people are on Facebook. I get it. But it's not necessarily the most important or best place sometimes for where you should be. And so that is being rebounded a little bit. There's a lot more thinking that it just because it exists. The real fear is that Facebook is, Zuckerberg's telling people we don't need agencies. we'll just do our, you just give us the money and we'll do the A/B testing. We'll tell you what the lines are that, or what the ideas are that are going to work, and we'll spit it back out to you. So what he's done is the agencies have actually promoted the use of performance marketing to their clients and done the work to the idea that Facebook doesn't need agencies. I mean, that is kind of a Armageddon view of the business, but in some respects, it's not untrue either. And I think that is now shifting, and people are more, and we're understanding that creative has a far greater impact and more importance to associate with long-term brand saliency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting the point you make about, agencies being able to introduce their clients or get their clients set up and running on like specific channels. But something we often hear in marketing and, I'm sure in advertising as well, is that you can't rely too much on any one channel either, because with the example you just gave, right, with Meta, well, if they decide like, okay, hey, we'll just use our, like Llama AI or whatever to do all of the ad copy and creative, create all the targeting, do all the testing, right? Like you've just kind of worked yourself into obsolescence, right? If you're only focused on that one channel. So I definitely understand that connection between having that brand salience and having that more sustainable, longer lasting brand versus just focusing on the quick wins on the channels, on a channel basis now. And I think from the creative aspect, the example that I like to think about this, that I think is understandable for everyone, even if you're not an advertising expert, is, and it also ties in with that, element of truth that you had mentioned. But if you think about the jokes online about like millennial gray and millennial sad beige, right? Everybody laughs when they see that because they know exactly what you're talking about, which is that everything in like millennial interior design was like all gray or all beige, was all neutrals. There was no color. There was no personality showing up, right? And in our advertising, right, we need to have personality. There needs to be color. It needs to be creative. It needs to stand out and connect with people. Otherwise, you might be able to serve ads to more people faster on these different channels, but is your brand really sticking out? Is it really, you know what I mean? So bringing that connection. Yeah.
I agree. And, that goes back to in real life too, which is with everything online. Efficiency and is not necessarily the end all and be all. I would say when it's so true. I would say when people started saying in our business that judgment didn't matter a little bit. Not only did it take away a lot of jobs and a lot of people's creative instincts and sort of downgrade the ability in the mix, it also took the charm out of the business. And charm, by the way, is not something you want to lose. When you have a discussion about how you feel about something, it comes from your personal background, not just because some A/B tester told you what to think. And so that part of the business is so critical to, creating an in which the ads speak to people and are not just efficient. We know it's not just judgment that counts. We know what works. If you look at all the books, I call the books, in other words, they used to be in books, all the ads that sort of won awards and were considered for being successful, and we know that they're associated with, Coca-Cola success or whatever. If you look at all of those years, there are certain tenets, there are certain belief systems of what this industry has and holds on to as being effective in branding exercises, being close to the product or service, revealing truth, which we talked about. Production is only in service of great ideas, which actually impacts, as another discussion, impacts the use of AI. There are various tenets that we all know are so important to successful advertising that, yes, someone who has a good post might have a success story on this recent post and might have to, but if they want to do long-term branding over the course of a period of time, and they work for different businesses, they need to understand those tenets. And that's why for years our agency has taught advertising. The people in our agency has always taught the business, because those tenets, those learned disciplines, represent the ability to do a great branding product. And that's sort of another aspect to kind of answering your question, I think.
Yeah, and I like that you called out that efficiency is not the end all be all, while you were sharing that. And I would love, because I understand where you're coming from and I agree with you, right? When I think about what I see online about AI, for example, even some of the conversations I've had on the podcast about AI, I definitely see some of the positive use cases. I also have concerns about this sort of epidemic of sameness and, using AI, how can you really be truly creative? But then it all ties back to that argument for efficiency within broader organizations. So for the people listening to this podcast, whether they're an independent practitioner or they're a marketer in-house, how do they change their leadership's mind about efficiency being the end all be all? How do they start that conversation about balancing that out, right? Because I like that you frame it as an imbalance, because I think you hit the nail on the head. How do they start that conversation with their leadership?
First of all, every leadership has differences, right? Let me just talk a little bit about AI and sort of how it's represented and what it should do, and I'll speak a little about sort of convincing clients that there's a balance and that we're in a place that's not so good. The fact of the matter, AI is extremely useful in, for example, video production. But, and here's the but, it's a big but it needs to start with an idea first, right? We talked about the fact that a brand has to be expressed. You have to take up part of their mental availability. You've got to create something that perhaps has a surprise in it. The person is involved to some extent, as they would be in a comedy thing. Oh yeah, that makes sense to me. In order to get there, you need an idea. So it has to start with a very strong idea. Then you can say to yourself, well, in order to make this idea happen, it might be good to use AI. We just did a commercial with AI that would not have been able to be done quickly, efficiently, and this is where efficiency makes sense. Quickly, efficiently, a cost much less, and actually, AI gives you the ability to see where you're going to end up before you end up there. But you're not hiring all these people and doing a production necessarily. You're using AI to get there. A quick example, we had Rogers Fish Co. has delivery of fish. Fresh fish is delivered. It's a client, and it's an online business. So we show a truck with Legal Seafoods going up to someone's house delivering fresh fish. Well, right after they delivered it in this 15-second commercial, all of these seagulls came from all over to attack the house that it was delivered to, showing how fresh the fish is. Well, getting seagulls on film to do that would be, cost it. You wouldn't be able to do it. And there we did it within 2 hours, and here we had a commercial. So it has tremendous use only in service of an idea. And that gets back to your part of your other question, which is what really instigates a person to move to branding versus performance. And that is great ideas. So the great ideas that you come up with should be able to present themselves in a way, whether that's an AI commercial, you show a client, a storyboard, whatever you show, a two-dimensional idea, something that you want to put in online video, whatever it is, starts with an idea. And that idea is so good that it becomes irresistible to the client. It is such a perfect expression of what the client wants to say in a way that they hadn't thought about it before. Plenty of examples of that. In a new way, in a new twist, it becomes an idea. We often say, if we do a poster with an idea, will that person put it on their wall? And without me asking, put it on their wall. I wouldn't ask. And we have plenty of examples of that. They're so proud of the idea. It's such a strong representation of who they are that they can't resist it. That is the best way to sell a client. So it goes back to you and not to the selling process, to the creator that says, have you thought enough about what a great idea would be for this client? Are you clear enough on how that could move people? And they will see that. Most clients will see that. Not 100% of clients, not every client will see it, but most will. And I'm going to say one other thing. I'm an agency that's taken a lot of risks, and we've pushed the envelope many times. But I would say that your client knows more than you think. So do not treat your client as if they are not knowledgeable or not creative. Do not look at it that way. Look at your client as if they are truly the most knowledgeable people in the room when it comes to their own business. Respect them for that. You will only add value. And the best thing that a great agency could do is not to do something that they can't, that they can do something, to do something they can't do, which is take what they say, understand that they have something to say, and add value to that process. We are a value-added service at best. And to me, that's a viewpoint that allows you to understand and respect the relationship that will help you sell a lot of work.
Beautifully said, Ellis. I love the points that you just made. And, I think we have time for one more question. And what I really want to ask you is, you've been at this for a long time, right? You have a very, very storied career, and you have seen a lot of different eras of advertising, right? Like even before the .com bubble and all of that. So, we were just touching on the AI piece, right? And the power of ideas. And I think that is such a powerful statement that you made. And I also think it's very easy for, someone like me, I'm 33, I've been in the game for like 15 years or so, almost 15 years. And it's just really easy to look at all the AI stuff and be like, oh my gosh, this is it. It's over. We don't get to be creative anymore. We don't get to have big ideas. Obviously, that's not true, right? So what advice would you give to people that are, newer in their careers, or maybe are feeling like, oh my God, AI is the end? What would you say to them, and how have you seen similar things play out in the past?
When I started out, let me just be clear. When I started out in my business, I don't know how many years ago, but when I started the business, nothing, zero, literally zero. I begged for a space in somebody else's business. We had no clients. We had nothing. We just, we had it, and we thought we had really good ideas in the back of our heads. We didn't even express them yet. And we started small, really small. And that was the best thing we ever did. And the reason it's the best thing you ever did is because if you start small, if you do ideas for something, you don't need a big client. You just need a great idea, and you could sell it to anybody. I mean, the Daffy's was a 2-store operation or something when we first started. And I saw this little ad in New York Magazine that I thought, oh, well, this is really not so good. I called her up and she said, yeah, come on over. And we did some great work for them. But I had even smaller accounts than that, before that, and just showing great ideas that you can do to start the process gives you a position. The winning position you get is you get confidence, and confidence is not so easy to get to. The best way to do it is to have somebody feel good about and have an effective product if you start out. So starting out small is almost better than the people. I remember at my time, there was somebody who got a big account and all that, and they lost it within a year. But what did they have? They didn't have confidence. They had a big account. I have all the confidence. You can take all my accounts away right now, and we would start over just as easily as we did 38 years ago. It is part of our DNA. It's built into who we are, that we know that ideas will always win at the end of the day. And I feel that the fear of AI is much more of a fear factor. What AI does to the advertising business is it rejiggers the importance of various people within the organization. So production people become potentially different people, and that's just rejiggering a big agency in terms of priorities. But ideas will win the day at the end. And if you are a person with ideas, show them, make them happen somehow, somewhere, and you will build the confidence like I did that, you can never take it away.
Yes, not to be trite, but believe in yourself, right? I like
Yeah.
to say, and I actually want to do an episode on this, but what I like to say it to my team is have the audacity, like when it comes to confidence, just in a good way, of course, not a bad way, but like have the audacity to put that idea out there and make that come to life, right? So I absolutely love that point. I think that's such great advice. And Ellis, honestly, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, and I appreciate you sharing your insights and your perspective with me, with my listeners. It was a great conversation, and really a privilege to interview you. You have such an amazing career and story and experience, so I just really appreciate you coming on to share that with me and my audience as, a small business owner as well, a small agency owner on the PR side and everything. So just really appreciate it. And, I would love, for our listeners to be able to connect with you after the show. So if you want to learn more about DeVito Verdi, you can go to www.devitoverdi.com. That's DEVITOVERDI.com. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. And Ellis, for all of our friends here at Good Marketing with Stephanie, where can they find you on social media to connect?
Well, I'm really a kind of a LinkedIn. I have a bit of an addiction to that platform, and you could definitely find me and I'm really, I spend a lot of time actually talking to people who are starting in the business, and and it's not necessarily for jobs or whatever. It's really kind of just because I believe in sort of how we created what we created, and I love passing that on to people. So if you want to have coffee or whatever, I'm happy to do that. And LinkedIn is probably, you can find me on LinkedIn quite often.
Awesome. And love that, the openness to just connect with people and chat with them. I find that's honestly like, for me, like, especially like I mentioned, I'm new to Richmond, for example, and people have been so open to connecting with me and then having a coffee with me. And it really goes a long way when you're building your career or you're building a network in a new place, right? So for everybody listening, definitely take Ellis up on that. But thank you again for joining us, Ellis. It was a pleasure. And for everybody listening, until next time, if you learned something new or you heard an idea during this conversation that lit a spark within you, right? Please subscribe, rate, and share our podcast. It's Good Marketing with Stephanie, and I will see you next time. Thank you, Ellis.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. See you soon.